truth is about principle. It's about doctrine. It's about, certain principles of reality of the kingdom. And those are ideas. But what we sometimes can fail to see is what are the images? What is the how does truth and how do principles of truth build the imagination? Because our lives will move in the direction of our strongest ideas and images, or sometimes the way Dallas Willard would say it is you live at the mercy of your ideas and images. That's how you're going to live. Your strongest ideas and your strongest images is where you'll move your life.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Jacob Sheriff Podcast. We're excited to bring you this episode today. We're going to be talking about imagination. Now that may sound kind of, ethereal and out there, but what we've really been learning and discovering lately, even in some of the things Pastor Jacob's been teaching on, is how important it is to have the right images and ideas in our minds, in our imaginations, and how that leads to transformation in the long term. It's how faith actually can be expressed and things like that. And so let's jump into the conversation today around imagination, images, ideas, and maybe even some of the contrast between what the world would say, this is what we should be thinking, this is what we should be imagining, and then what the kingdom claims is the ultimate reality. And so that's kind of a broad picture of where we're going. But let's just take our time and get there. So you've been teaching on this just even recently, this past Sunday, faith and the imagination. Where did this kind of emphasis and focus come from just even recently and what God's been showing you?
Because my main vision and purpose in life is see people transformed by Jesus. That's kind of what we as a church are moving toward. I do sort of obsess over what leads to transformation and what in our relationship with the Lord will lead to transformation, and then what are the things that we in partnership with Jesus are responsible for, our part of the transformation, which we're not responsible for transforming ourselves. We are responsible for our relationship with Jesus, and then he brings transformation. Well, we don't need to be ignorant of how that happens. And so what's been on my mind for the last couple months is what does it mean to live by faith? How do we operate in faith? And I believe that we're seeing and going to see more and more great acts that God is working, and faith is how we get in on that. And so I've just been really trying to meditate and think through what are all the elements of faith and how do we nurture stronger and stronger faith that isn't just pretension. I hate that. Many people approach their faith as if they have to pretend their way into kind of the fake it till you make it. And so I don't know, I'm wired in such a way to start finding as much root systems as possible to get to the early roots of something and then put the focus there and see how that works. And I can't get around how the scripture is pretty clear. Romans 12:2, to not be conformed to the world, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so transformation isn't exclusively how our mind is transformed, but that is an early form of transformation that if our minds are being transformed by Jesus, then it will bring transformation. It'll lead to other levels of transformation in the rest of our life. So I spent some time just really thinking through that and reading through that. And I'm no surprise, I'm a Dallas Willard fan. So I just read through Dallas Willard, and there's just some things he talks about in the transformation of the mind that I could see how it connects to how we nurture faith and how it leads to transformation in our whole life. And it comes down to this: how our minds work is through ideas and images. And that's just generally how that's the fabric of thoughts. And our thought life leads to other levels that turn into our behaviors and habits and things like that. So knowing our thoughts, knowing where our thoughts come from and how to put our thoughts on the Lord is it's like it has a greater effect. When you put energy there, it has a greater long-term effect. And that comes down to thoughts are built on ideas and images. And so that's what I began exploring. Just, okay, well then what are the ideas that are most prevalent in our world? What are the ideas that the enemy would want us to have? What are the ideas that the flesh wants to nurture? And then what are the accompanying images? it came back into my mind when I was in the context of thinking through healing. And I remember working through when we were praying for our son and seeing Urias, who was diagnosed, or the prognosis of him was very bleak, very bad, and it came with images on what that would look like. And I knew I had to change the image in my mind of what I was seeing in my son, that would change my prayer. And then I've just seen that worked out in so many other ways of what is an imagination that is nurtured in the kingdom of God? What kind of if our thoughts will then trickle down into our behaviors, our words, our actions, our habits, and things like that, then what kinds of thoughts would be connected to the kingdom? And humans are made with an imagination. So our thoughts and our imagination will work together. What would an imagination that is nurtured in the kingdom be like? And that's just what I started just obsessing over and trying to see all the different ways that would work out, and just studying that out in Scripture. So that's the framework behind this. This is a key. It's not the only one, but it is key in our transformation, is having our thoughts transformed, our thoughts changed, and that will lead to the transformation of our mind. And that comes down to ideas, our assumptions about reality, ideas, and then images. And many people in the Christian world don't know how to connect images to that and our imagination. We believe that it's the word that sets us free. The truth will set us free. And in our world, we see truth as kind of principle oriented, or in the church, doctrinally oriented. So truth is about principle. It's about doctrine. It's about, certain principles of reality of the kingdom. And those are ideas. But what we sometimes can fail to see is, what are the images? What is the how does truth and how do principles of truth build the imagination? Because our lives will move in the direction of our strongest ideas and images, or sometimes the way Dallas Willard would say it is, you live at the mercy of your ideas and images. That's how you're going to live. Your strongest ideas and your strongest images is where you'll move your life.
Wow. So Hannah, whenever you hear that, and how does that hit you as far as I know one thing that you're very passionate about is guarding your heart. And I feel like there's some overlap here, just even in recognizing what we allow in actually can take root and start to create ideas and images in our minds. So whenever you hear this, kind of, how does it hit you? How does it make you feel?
Yeah, so I think that just this idea that, really what is going on in our head is impacting, the way we are walking things out. And so I immediately kind of try to put it in scenarios in my mind, like, what does this mean, the concept into my life? Like, how do I apply that? And one of the things that I think about is all the ideas and images that we have about what relationships, should look like. And, many things factor into how those ideas and images have been formed, because we all know that just because you come from something that wasn't the ideal, there's still hope that you can have a healthy relationship or whatever. So I start kind of putting it into those scenarios. Right. So in relationships, just because what you've experienced or what you've seen is a brokenness in relationship doesn't mean that that's all you can experience. However, oftentimes that takes a transformation of your thinking and a transformation of maybe seeing that modeled through someone else's life that actually helps you believe that it can be yours. But often in generations, that epiphany or that moment of awareness doesn't always happen. And so you have cycles of the same thing going on, and I'm not saying that just because you see it right and hope for it, it's going to happen. It takes a lot of nurturing the vision and stuff like that. So I don't know. I start thinking about how do I actually get the right picture in my mind. When, like, where do I go searching for that?
Sure.
You know? And
Well,
that's where I would say heart kind of comes into.
In the theme of relationships, specifically, what are some of the cultural ideas that are out there that that if we're not paying attention, that we're just we adopt because of how we
Like that's the
grew up.
narrative
Yeah,
going
it's
on.
just what's going on. Like there's so much out there in the culture today that is trying to, I mean, literally that's what advertising does, right?
Yeah.
Is like present an idea or an image and present it in a way that makes you feel like you don't have something, you need this thing, spend your money and get this thing, you know? And it's kind of at a base level of, of this idea, but it's powerful, right? Like if you can get somebody to picture themselves with the product that you're producing or the course that you're offering or the lifestyle that you're promising, then they have bought into this process of like, oh, that could be mine. And you've even produced a level of discontentment in them. Like they don't feel satisfied until they have that thing. To me, like that's kind of how the culture gets shaped over time, is by ideas and images being, or I mean, you could even say idols being put in place that causes us to orient ourselves and our focus around those things that are temporary, and then all of a sudden, like our lives start to take on that shape of what we're focused on. Yeah.
Let's stick with some critical analysis here.
Yep.
Forgive me for breaking this down.
No, it's good.
We're going all over the place a little bit.
But if we can trace some of this back through some, not history like specifics of history, but just how the world has changed, then we can look with a little more critical eye as to what's in front of us now. If you go back to Genesis 3, like the original fall, first thing the enemy did was present a different idea in question form. Has God said?
Right.
Then he paints a picture of an image. That God didn't like. Okay, that's not true.
That's good.
If you do eat it, God knows you will be like God. So the enemy is putting some kind of picture in the mind of the principle. God is holding out on you. So that's the idea. God's holding out on you. There's more here that you can enjoy and experience if you partake of this. Then the image, God knows you'll be like God, knowing good and evil. That's an image. So that's how that works in something very simple, is that an idea and image gets placed in the human imagination that then prompts an action. And in that case, disobedience, and all hell breaks loose from that. If you go through then the course of history, generally how that works is, thinkers of the world, they'll think through the ideas, but what are ideas? Ideas are models or assumptions about reality. That's just how, it's what you assume to be true about the world.
Right.
Some of those things are true. You just take natural laws, gravity, law of thermodynamics. Those are ideas, but they're not just conceptual ideas. They really are how things work in this world. There's boundaries to it. There's laws to it. It's just how the world works. Then there are more conceptual ideas or interpersonal ideas that get worked out in the family unit. That's where, when you're young, you're learning how the world is. You don't know anything about the world, so your primary mode of you're building your ideas and images are in the family unit. So how you're raised, how do I make it in the world? How do I get attention? How do I receive what I want? How does the world work with marriage and relationships and with my siblings? So you're building up all these ideas and images. As you grow, what gets presented is, because humans are worshiping creatures, God said, don't make an image. And so we have to get, well, then what is the image in our mind that we're to see of God? God doesn't need to be demoted into a natural image. He's already made an image, humans. But what the world will do, and there's a value in the kingdom as well, but let's just exclusively talk about the world when you talk about idols. In the ancient world, it's a literal idol, like it's a statue.
Right.
You get after that, and idols are no longer statues; they're people. So what the world would present to, you might have a philosopher crafting an idea in the back room, but it doesn't take root in society until it's embodied by an idol, a person. And that person becomes the image that we look at and say, that's what I want. That's the good life. That's what it's like to really be a human. That's what it's like to really live. And so we have to see, well, what kind of person is being promoted, being elevated to as the ideal. That's how kind of the world has always done it. Well, you get into the world of television, then you compound that with all forms of entertainment, and then you got entertainment at your fingertips 100% of the time. Then you compound that with social media. So not only do you have idols, you have the interpersonal network of idolatry.
Right.
And it's sending all these signals. Okay, so that's just kind of an analysis of how this works. Then we look at then how do we then see what is being prompted to us as the ideal? You could put it generically in the category of the good life. This is what it's like to be human. And if you go back, 60 years ago, if anybody that's of age, like older, is even listening or watching this will resonate deeply. What was presented as like a man was John Wayne.
Right. The Duke.
The Duke.
So, in the silent generation, there was something with like a World War II vet, like that. That's what it was like. That's what, for good or bad, it was profitable for Americans to see the good life is a soldier who's willing to give up their life for their country and their family, for good or bad. I'm not making any critique on that. It's just that's what was presented. Right. As you get out of wartime, what kinds of images do we want to nurture? Well, the Duke is the man's man, the guy that will swing pump his shotguns or his rifles by swinging them on horseback, and that's what, like, for men in that time, that's what's being presented as the good life. And then all technological advances are like trying to push us to this is the good life. We go into a realm of consumerism that the good life that's presented to us, and it started out maybe in earnest, but at least it was a bit innocuous when you have technological advancements that were about making life more convenient.
Right.
So things like dishwashers, microwaves, washers and dryers, all those kinds of things were about making life more convenient, to the point where there was a Senate hearing, and I can't remember what year. I want to say it was in the 60s. Could have been as late as the 80s. There was a Senate hearing that there was national, genuine concern that the American public would have too much time on their hands because of all these conveniences.
The idea was like, technology is going to advance to the point where we have nothing but leisure time, and it's like all of the tediousness of life is going to be taken care of by robots or technology, and what are we going to do with all this leisure time that we have?
Yeah, so that's just know what the mode is. The mode of all of this is what is being presented as the good life.
Right.
Now you have all of our cultural idols, our cultural heroes, our entertainers. There's almost no, I don't know how to say that nicely. All of our idols don't do anything but act.
Right.
They pretend.
Right.
But it's like, what is being couched around this pretending? It's about what you have. It's about what you receive. You receive attention. That's the good life. Then, man, maybe I'm just doing too much analysis. Is it time to breathe on this a second?
No, I mean, this is all
okay.
This is a bit of a cultural critique right now, right? It's like, hey, we're going to get to kingdom here in a bit. Yeah, this is the imagination that the world is presenting. This is the image. This is the idea. And if we recognize it for what it is, then we can understand what's the counter.
If you are unaware, you will go with this flow.
It's
The current is too strong to resist it if you're unaware.
Yeah.
And that's my motive here, is to just evoke some awareness. What has gotten interesting in the social media world is now who is getting elevated. It's the people that are the most self-absorbed. If I can get enough attention around me,
right? It's the influencer.
Influencer.
And this is where I've begun my critique, but I haven't analyzed this enough. I've tried to see like what gets the most traction. It's either provocative, so you have to provoke something, you have to provoke anger, desire, just something provocative or controversial. Or this is what's interesting, and I'm open to analysis on this. Clever. Clever is probably has the most attraction. Meme. It's something that is clever, that catches you by surprise, gives you a tiny bit of like humorous dopamine laugh, enjoyment, and then you move on. Like that's what seems to be getting traced, just being clever. And I haven't really figured out what is the motive on that, because the kingdom's not clever. So anyway, that's just another thing. So that's what we're observing is like who's being presented as the good life. It's the people who have it all together. They're presenting things as having it all together, or they couch not having it all together as a way of garnering attention and empathy or compassion, but really it's just pity. That's what's being presented is what I have, what I can get, the attention, fame. And like none of this is new to the human race. It's all lust, greed, and pride. It's just a different way of presenting the same thing. And then what has been interesting in the last, 8-ish years has been how in the absence of a dominant cultural religion, secularism can't survive on its own. It's a vacuum. It can't survive on its own too long. The human being needs some kind of religious orientation because of worship, and it's become politics. Entertainment and politics have collided in such a point where our politics is entertainment.
Right.
So what's being presented there is power and influence. So all these, it's lust, greed, and pride. That's ideas that are being presented now aren't just philosophical ideas. They are first images. And when people buy wholesale the image, they're getting the idea with it without even knowing it.
Right.
And so you get, we were just having a conversation off camera beforehand that like the way influencers will get attention and, on social is just outrageous, almost stupid advice. It's just, it's clever, it's humorous. And then what gets traction is then the reactions to this. And it's almost all just stupid. If you really analyze the idea that's being presented, not always, but a lot of the times, it's self-orientation and stupid.
Yeah. And it's mindless most of the time as well. It's just like, what can I say that will like appeal or get a reaction at like the most base level? So I can either make you mad or I can try to excite some other sort of base desire. And if I can't like engage you at an animal base level, then like we as a society have kind of allowed for like the dumbing down of our senses to like, well, if you can't entertain me in 3 seconds, I'm not interested.
Exactly.
It's like, it's the problem with even short form like content and stuff. Like Audrey and I love to just sit down together and watch reels on Instagram. And it's just like, aha, that's hilarious. And then you go to the next one, you go to the next one until something kind of jumps up and entertain it. Like it's cleverness. It's got to be quick. And then there's just like novelty, right? It's like, we got to have something new all the time. And if I can't get something new, like then I'm not getting the dopamine hit. I'm not getting the fun of discovery or whatever. And then, it's just, it's a frustrating experience. But then like the entire, like these companies are throwing billions of dollars into finding ways to refine their algorithms, to refine their technology to appeal to that base level human, just, consumer instinct.
There's a social media critic, and now I can't remember his name. He's got a lot of stuff on YouTube. he used to work in big tech, and he would call it just race to the bottom of the brainstem. Like, how low can you go? And that's what all technology is trying to do, is just activate and elevate your base desire, your animalistic type base desires. But all of these things are having an impact on your mind, and it's cultivating thoughts and feelings.
Right.
And those thoughts are governed by ideas and images. It's just how it works. And so if you're going to be intentional, we have to start first critiquing what's being presented. Then we have to have an alternative to focus on. And I'm not an advocate of like not having social media ever. I mean, there's some people that will advocate for that, and I think that that's good for some people. It exists. It's out there. We're going to have to figure out how to be in the world without being of it. So I'm not necessarily recommending for everyone, don't be on any social media, but know that if you have this and if you engage in it, it is having an impact on your mind.
Right.
And it is putting thoughts and images into your mind. Correlated with this, I would say, because I like throwing out resources and hey, here's a book to read. 2 books I'd recommend: Renovation of the Heart by Dallas Willard, and then You Are What You Love by James K.A. Smith. He talks about cultural liturgies and how the culture is giving you a liturgy of formation. And he'll talk about the liturgy of the shopping mall, the liturgy of the sports arena, and all these things are forming you into a particular kind of person and the way he does it. And one of the things he talks about, if you talk about the liturgy of the shopping mall, is that it's ideas and images. It's icons or idols. These are the mannequins that are posed a particular way with this particular style or with this particular accessory as a way to evoke desire. And then by evoking desire, we point our life in the direction of our strongest desires. Well, those desires get nurtured by ideas and images.
Right.
I'm nurturing that image. And so we're all on health journey. I'm for being healthy, but if you look at what's presented, is you have to have this like perfect body, this aesthetic body, and your worth and your value to the world is based on your looks. Like, that's not a new thing. It's just now it's constantly being pushed in front of us as the ideal, as the good life. And it's forming us into particular kinds of people. And so we have to be conscious of what are we desiring? What's the kind of life we desire? And then what are the ideas and images? What are the icons we are looking at that move us in the direction of the kingdom? And, the most obvious fact about all this is that's Jesus.
Sure.
He is the image. The word image in Colossians 1:15, he is the image of the invisible God. That's the Greek word icon. He is the visible image of the invisible God. He is the idea and image of the good life, of the kind of life God made human beings to have.
Yeah. So there's, the first part of this equation is awareness, is like understanding how our minds operate, how our minds work, how our imaginations even were designed by our Creator. Like, part of bearing the image of God is our imagination, like our ability to create, our ability to observe the world around us and then picture something that's not there yet. And you took it even back to the very beginning of the fall of man. It's like that was a part that made us uniquely human, but it was also a unique vulnerability.
Absolutely.
And that the devil exploited. And so we have to recognize that it's still a vulnerability in us today. Like, it's an area. It's the original strategy, right? It's like the original. That's what temptation is. When you even look at the story of Jesus in the desert, what is the devil tempting him with? He's not tempting him with sin. He's tempting him with images, with ideas, with like, hey, like, here's all the kingdoms of the world. And if you just bow down to me, I'll give you every single one of them. Like, there's an attempt to appeal to a side of the human condition that desires to be adored or worshipped or things like that. And we as humans, if we're not aware of it, we're just led around like a carrot on a stick, right? It's just like we're just being kind of led around by whatever whims of culture or whatever things that we're allowing into our life to kind of shape and manipulate us. But once we're aware of it, then we can actually recognize, if I focus on the right things, if I cultivate the right images, if I allow my imagination, my mind to be transformed and not be conformed to this world, all of a sudden the things that are truly good become possible. The things that are truly beautiful become within reach. They become at hand, so to speak. And so how do we, once we recognize that there's this need, what are ways that we can actually cultivate the right imagination and images in our minds?
I monologued a while.
Yeah, this is such a good topic.
Let me throw it to you.
Yeah, no, this is such a good topic. I feel like I'm learning as I'm listening. So, and I would just say that the awareness piece is so vital. And if that's not there, being on that journey, but desires is kind of where I go, is what being able to be aware of the desires of our heart, like you were talking about the heart. And that desire so much is has to be nurtured rightly, but we have to have a bigger vision for why, because otherwise what's so wrong with following the carrot? What's so wrong with being led unaware of where it's actually taking us? And I think that if you don't have that desire or are even able to see how desires out of hand can lead you places that maybe you never knew you would find yourself or whatever, that's just kind of what I'm processing as we're talking. Is at the core, we are worshiping beings. Like we in us, and I remember having this conversation with one of our kids, that at the core of us, like we're desiring to worship something. And if we're not aware of what that outlet is, and for some, those temptations can be more dangerous. And for others, the temptation can be more hidden, or whatever that is. And so it can't just be because I want something good or whatever that desire has to be driven by and motivated by something that actually can ground us. And that's to me where kingdom thinking, comes in and where renewing our mind to the truth that actually can ground us. And the idea that talks about in Psalms about what are we meditating on, and that we're to be meditating on the word. None of those things are to make us feel better about ourselves, but no, like we will be tossed all over the place if we have nothing that actually keeps us grounded. So those are the things I'm just kind of thinking of as we're unpacking this, that there has to be a moment or an understanding or a journey of discovery to what desires do I want to lead me, So I get really practical really fast.
Well, you have to unhurry your life long enough to become more self-aware, to think critically about, all right, what are the desires driving me right now? What is influencing those desires? And it's not just, looking at your screen time. It's like, okay, well, what is the image that's being presented to me?
And I think, we're very much in, all three of us, in the raising of kids. And I think that those are some of the dangers of technology to our kids early, is they don't have that in them yet to really have the awareness of what those desires, what's drawing those things. And those are the dangers, of it. They don't, and I mean, I would say, our generation didn't grow up with all of that right in front of us. And so there was disciplines or habits of boredom that we just interacted with, that I do fear that for this generation, where there's always something to look at and always something to feel that newness,
One of the things that's sticking out to me in this conversation is the recognition that desires are downstream from the imagination. They're not the initiator.
Yeah.
And I think we get that backwards a lot of times.
Good.
We feel like we're driven from our desires, and then we're frustrated when we have the wrong desires.
Mm-hmm.
But even before that, those desires came from images or imaginations that were the wrong thing to begin with.
Right.
The like recognizing that the desires, it's like it's the first sprout of the seed that was planted before. It's not the seed itself.
Mm-hmm.
And our desires, like that's what Satan uses to draw us away, to tempt us and draw us away.
Mm-hmm.
But when we can recognize that we can over time change our desires, not by not by just wanting to or working harder, but by changing our orientation, like changing what we're focused on, changing what we're paying attention to, then all of a sudden our desires start to change, not because we're white knuckling it or brute forcing it. It's like, no, we've been shown a superior image. We've been able to perceive something that's more beautiful than what we thought we wanted, and then allow our new picture and imagination, preferably, obviously, something that God placed in there, to create new desires in our hearts. It's like delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Right? It's like there's a delight that comes before the desire is even in there. It's like we have to choose to intentionally cultivate images and ideas that will result in the kind of desires that will actually influence our habits that result in a behavior that takes us in a different direction.
So I'm just thinking, let's run through a few, not full analyses, but there's one group of people that listen and watch this that are young and young adult and single, kind of moving into the season of their life of career and family and all that.
Right.
So if we take that group of people and just do a quick cultural analysis, what are the primary ideas and images that are being thrusted upon them? I think in the realm of social media, a big stream, I'm sure it gets on a lot of people's algorithms, are going to be financially successful entrepreneurial people in their 20s.
Right.
And some of that is genuine and real. A whole lot of it is just wild, maybe completely fake. If not fake, this person got lucky or inherited money but didn't admit it, and is driving around.
Or they're in debt up to their eyeballs, leveraged to the hilt.
And they're trying to use YouTube to pay it all back, So what a possible image, an idea that's being presented is, if you're not financially successful before you're 30, you're doing it wrong. If you're not wealthy, leaking out your ears, and aesthetically good looking, and your spouse or your girlfriend, boyfriend is just eye candy, then you're a failure. Like you're not going to make it in this world. That's potentially, it's not the only, but it's kind of a big one. And that like making money should be easy. There's a few, there's at least a couple on Instagram, young 20-something entrepreneurial, wealthy individuals that like I follow just to keep an eye on it. And to this person's credit, they talk about trusting in God, about immense hard work. But that's one that's being presented. So what would be presented about the good life, and then connected to that, relationships? So how should relationships be if we're looking at social media and YouTube, things in that realm of entertainment? What is a good relationship or marriage like? One thing that I have a bit of a critique on, and to all my photographer and videographer friends, I am not critiquing your work. Okay. Just please hear me clearly. My close friends, this is their industry. So I am not critiquing their work. However, because of social media, more emphasis is put on the wedding and the look and the feel and how it's going to look. Not like sometimes not even in person. How is it going to look on Instagram or on YouTube? And all the emphasis is put on the look of the wedding, not the marriage.
Right.
And I kept thinking, like, doing premarital counseling and then follow-up marriage counseling. It's like if you put as much work and energy into your marriage as you did to the wedding, you guys would be fine.
Yep.
But you put most of your energy and effort into the wedding, and now you've got these. I see these young couples that are like in their 20s and broke, whose families are not wealthy, and they're feeling this pressure to create this Instagram worthy, beautiful wedding. And it's like, to what end and for what purpose?
Right.
And so that's icon, that's image and idea. You have to look good your wedding has to look good on Instagram for your wedding to be worth it or something.
I was literally watching a video the other day, and this couple was in a terrible financial situation, like 60 something $1,000 in debt. And when they first got married, they had no debt. And their first joint financial decision as a couple was to go $25,000 in debt for their wedding. And so the first 3 years of their life is going to be paying off their wedding. And could you imagine, like,
so let's clarify again to those wedding photographers and videographers, I'm not critiquing your work. You do really good work. It's beautiful. I'm critiquing the people who are shelling out ungodly amounts of dollars for the look
and money they don't have. Yeah. Is it like we're so short-term minded in our culture, right? It's like it's all about the moment, and we don't think long. Like the short-term decisions to make me feel good right now result in a long-term situation that's going to be very difficult and painful to pull themselves out of. In that example, but I know that story is all too common of couples who don't have the wisdom or the experience, or even, and sadly in some cases the parents who will come in and give them guidance of like, do not start your marriage off from this position, because you're setting yourself up for way more pain and struggle than you need to, when you could have a much more affordable wedding, or like have a very small church wedding and then have a big celebration, 5 years later when you've got some money, delayed gratification is not a cultural value.
It's not a popular thing right now.
Yeah. So that would be kind of just one cultural analysis. And now we would have to think, okay, well then what would kingdom be? Well, in the kingdom, there's a whole lot more emphasis on your relationship with God, your relationship with each other, nurturing self-sacrificial love, humility, service to one another, and almost nothing on the wedding itself. It's on the marriage. And so that's what, if we're looking at a kingdom image, it's going to be humility, servanthood, sacrifice, and wisdom, stewardship, those things. And that is what scriptures say is the good life. But here's the deal. It's not super sexy on Instagram. The good life in the kingdom does not always look that great on Instagram. And okay, so there's some more there. You want to go through a second one? Okay, sure, so another group of people is that's, I know, watch and listen, are kind of in our season of life. So we're talking about being married, maybe 5, 10, 15 years. Some are in that 20 years. I mean, there's plenty of people that you've been married 40 years and still watch YouTube or listen to podcasts. Thank you.
Thank you. And by the way, like and subscribe. Help us with that YouTube algorithm. We appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. So, we're in that like 15, 16, 17 years married. So we've gone through kind of 2 life cycles. Life is generally roughly, not exactly, roughly 7-year cycles. So, your first 7 years of marriage, is all about learning how to be one, learning how to just coordinate life together. Possibly most people will start having kids in that time. So now you're learning not just sacrificial service and love and humility to one another. Now you're both focused on a little one. It's, you got a lot in 7 years, but then you've doubled that. So you've had more kids. If you went for a larger family, more kids, and you're in the busyness of life, we're in a stage of our lives and career that it's not just like, hustle to get to the next thing or to make it in life. There's some stability in life. We have a settled career. We have a family, and now we're just trying to make it in kind of just what it means to raise children and all that. Okay. So in that, what's the ideas and images being presented to us in that phase? Mm-hmm. There's so much stuff on disciplining or not disciplining your children on social media or on YouTube. All sorts of advice that people give about raising children that are not, their kids aren't very old and they haven't suffered the consequences of their decisions that they're trying to tell everybody they should make. Yep. And there's pressure. I see pressure on young moms for their children to be cute all the time.
Birthday parties.
Birthday parties, yep.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Bedrooms, what everything needs to look like.
Bedrooms need to look Instagram worthy.
Right.
Color palettes, and it's like all this unnecessary pressure. Then, like, I also see, maybe it's just the algorithm on my YouTube, I don't know. I also see, like, it's kind of like life's messy, let it be messy. And it's like there's no order, no discipline. It's just like kids are in charge. John Christ, on a side note, has a whole bit on this about like not spanking your children. It's fantastic. Yeah, there's no paid promotion for this. If John Christ sees this, I love you, man. Like, that was a great show. I really did laugh out loud so many places. But like, that's kind of what's being presented. It's like our children are in charge of their own discipline. Now, you go really extreme, which is not likely anybody that's listening to this is really being influenced by the extreme. But it exists out there that now children get to determine reality itself. They can determine their own gender, their own pronouns, and all this kind of stuff. And thankfully, I'm seeing more and more people, not even Christians, just call that out. Like, that's you as a parent inflicting that upon your children. Stop it. But if you're not influenced by the extreme, you are influenced by the subtle. And, we take family pictures probably 3 times a year.
It's been more like 2. 2,
which is more than a lot of people. This is something.
Well, Audrey and I both do photography, videography, and I think that has ruined us on doing family photos because we do it like once every other year at this point. We're like, oh, that sounds so terrible.
Yeah, this is just a gift we give mom.
Yep.
That's what I tell them. It's my Christmas gift every year.
The gift, and we're happy to do it.
Nobody likes it. It brings the worst out of everyone.
But if you look at the pictures of our family, you're going to get one that's going to look fantastic. Our kids are cute. They're, maybe halfway smiling on one picture, but you don't get the 45 minutes of sheer chaos and discipline.
Right.
And that's what is presented to a lot of people is this idealized image. And you're comparing your everyday to this person's highlight reel. And chances are it's even photoshopped. Side note, I have a significant problem with the new cameras that erase reality.
Right.
That like you can make people and things disappear. To me, like you're getting further and further from reality when you're doing that. Side note over.
Yeah, maybe we should do an episode where we bring on some AI image generation. We've been having some fun with that in the creative office.
Gosh,
it's pretty,
I got a lot of
pretty
wild.
wild.
With that. So that's and then your marriage, should always be fun. Like there's a lot of stuff you see that's super funny about couples that play pranks on each other. And I look at those and go,
or the vacation dreams.
That's a horrible mess. Why would you do that to each other? You got to clean that up. Your kids ain't cleaning that up. Anyway, but that's what, and then like dream vacations that like you've got these images on the beach and then you're always comparing yourself. So what's that doing is it's putting ideas and images. For me to have a good marriage, we got to be always laughing and fun, which I'm not saying it should be misery, but it should be a little fun, but not necessarily pranks. Our children should be in charge or perfect or things should always just be cute. All these are ideas and images that's being thrusted upon us to say, this is what you should be. And when we're not aware, that's putting that in our imagination. We're imagining ourselves like that. And then we get confronted with reality, and it's like there's a dissonance to it. It's like, why is my life so imperfect? Why is my marriage in a slump? Why are my kids so not well behaved, and why are they so messy? Why is my house not that perfect? It's so messy and can't get a head of laundry, and we haven't, that messed up painted wall. We haven't painted that in 5 years, and it's like those are all things that now is affecting your mind, that affects your desires, that affects your actions and words and all that, and that's moving your life in a direction. And so kingdom. Sometimes you have to stop looking at the images that are in front of you. It's harder to keep looking at that and then also look at your own life and the kingdom, and those can combat a little too much. So sometimes you just have to shut that off. That's why there should be a good steady diet of solitude and silence and fasting and abstaining from entertainment and all that kind of stuff that are supposed to be spiritual disciplines in our life, so that we can nurture the right image. We need kingdom imagination for our marriage, for our family, for raising of our children, and then be vigilant at letting that evoke the strongest desires. That, like, a decision we made early on is like, okay, the primary objective of us raising our children is to raise them as disciples of Jesus. So whatever screen time, whatever games we allow, whatever entertainment we allow, it has to be put in the context of, if this is just innocuous entertainment, that's fine. We're cool with that. But is at any point this putting the wrong ideas and images in their mind of what we want to model a kingdom marriage, which is not going to be perfect. It's not going to be always everything's wonderful and fine. We have to work through relationship together. We have to learn sacrificial service together and model that, because we want that to be the primary image in their minds. And then we want to belong to a church that's giving them the right ideas and images as well, that they're seeing not just in their parents, but in a community, the kingdom. And so nurturing a kingdom imagination, like if you're ever going to live out a kingdom life and live out transformation, it has to, whether or not it begins this way, it must include a vigilance in the mind of nurturing the right kinds of images and ideas. And Jesus is the perfect of that. Yeah. He's the one that gives us that image in whatever it is. And that's why we study the scriptures, because we learn truth. Jesus said it's the abiding in the word. Well, you'll know the truth will make you free. The word and the truth is what sets us apart. John 17:17. We want to learn the word. And when we're confused by the word, or when it sends mixed signals, that's why we belong to a community of faith, that we're working out truth with one another and admitting our weaknesses, admitting our failures, or admitting our mistakes, allowing others to confront our wrong ideas and images, and give us better ideas and images. I'd say one thing that our generation is, and certainly a generation beneath us, are often deprived of, is elders in our life that live out kingdom imagery and can help us with a kingdom imagination. In culturally speaking, if you get older, your influence is over. It's the influencers are the young and the sexy. Well, we need people that have been at this for 4 decades and 5 decades, lovingly coaching us on, this is what this looks like. This is what this is. And when you're struggling in a marriage, I don't fault you for struggling in your marriage. It's okay. Every marriage goes through this, but let's work on it together. That's the kind of stuff that I think that the church should be doing. And that's the kind of environment we want to raise our kids, knowing that we've got to give them the right images and ideas. And then we have to be aware of the ideas and images that we nurture ourselves.
So bringing it back to transformation, like maybe a vision to put into our minds, an imagination that we should start to cultivate, is a transformed life that points people to Jesus as the source of true happiness and satisfaction, not because of the things that you get, but because because your orientation becomes so much less about you and your own happiness, that you start to take on an image that looks so much more like him. And if our lives take on that image, then our kids get to see a life lived in that way. And all of a sudden it's easier for them to imagine their lives shaped in and fashioned in that picture. And then their kids see it, and then their kids see it. And then through this process of imagination and transformation, more and more of the kingdom begins to invade the earth that we live in, and become a stronger and stronger contrast to the image and the empty image that the world is trying to create and get us to buy into. And so if we each individually on our own choose to, like, at the very basic level, only allow things into our imagination that would lead to the right kind of desires and the right kind of focus and orientation that begins to work itself out in transformation into Christ likeness, like, what sort of long-term effect, when, like, what's the compound interest on that, right? It's like, how much of a downstream effect can that have on the lives of the people that we're connected to, and the lives of the people that they'll be connected to. And, like, that's, I think, the call to the church in this hour is for us each to step up into that and own that actual call to discipleship that Jesus called us into. It's like, it's not about, going to church and getting the little nugget and getting the clever thing that you need to make your life better. Like, that's a cultural, consumeristic approach. That's the wrong imagination. Like, the kind of image we want people to start to get in their minds is like a life fully transformed and surrendered to Jesus. And what does that look like? Yeah. And it's not a condemnation thing. It's not you're never going to measure up. It's how do we spark desire for that? Right. Desire is downstream from imagination. So how do we focus on the things that lead to the right kinds of desires? Because, like, I always mix up the scripture when I try to quote it, but the scripture about God works in us both the desire and the will to do what pleases him. Like, our desires can be changed if we submit them to Jesus. And like, that's so much easier to do when you want to do it than it is when you feel like you have to do it.
Yeah. No, that's really
well, if you look at, like, I can speak, it's this history of my family. And it's not dissimilar from y'all's even. Like, my mom came from kind of, I don't want to say dead religion, but just sort of just more practiced Christianity than transformative Christianity. And my dad came from a weird paradoxical combination of like hyper legalism and total heathen, like just lost as lost can be. And they set a different trajectory for our family, and raised me and my siblings in a different environment that was more alive, but it was messy. It was very early coming back from some of those things. My dad admits, like, the first 10 years of parenting was just like, he's like, I just didn't know what I was doing, and we're just practicing. He would say it that, like, I'm having to real time live out my own change of thinking in my parenting. And, my brother and I primarily were products of that we were like part of his process. And now, decades later, we're raising our children even further advanced from that. Like, I don't really know legalism. I've observed it. I've seen the effects. I see my dad's hatred of it. I see my mom's dissatisfaction with just going through the motions. And because I've observed that and observed them, I have a good, healthy distance from legalism. My kids don't even know what legalism is. They couldn't register it in a person. They would just, like, if they heard it, it would just sound weird to them. Like, that's the kind of stuff we have to have a vision for that isn't like your own transformation might not be Instagram worthy until you're a grandparent.
Right.
And we can't be just looking for the immediate, like, I got to experience this now. It's like, I've got to stay on this journey. When you're talking about compound interest, my parents and y'all's parents are seeing what their decisions decades ago now are having a compound effect in their grandchildren. And I'm excited to see another generation. I'm curious what a fourth is going to look like. I mean, we have our concerns about raising our children we're hyper-focused in that season right now. But I'm curious, the vision we have, how will that look like in our children's children that we have to nurture and we have to imagine. And I know for me, personally speaking, where this was the most important change was when I found myself a lot of anxiety and control. It was having an impact on my body. I had to nurture the imagination, the image. I had to nurture the image of what me being transformed by Jesus into a peaceful person looked like. I could get it. I nurtured the image of Jesus as a peaceful person, an unanxious presence, but I had to also see him in me and me in him. And that changed the trajectory. That's what really accentuated or catalyzed a lot of spiritual disciplines in my life was not a desire to be disciplined. I still don't really have a desire to be disciplined, but a phrase we're throwing around a whole lot more. I have a vision. I nurture a vision in my imagination of being in Christ, that I'm not fully there yet, of being, in this case, a person of peace. Just, you couldn't shake Jesus. And that's what I want. And I have to nurture that image of what would it look like? What does it look like for me to be unshakable, to be a person of peace? Yeah. And then your life moves in the direction of your strongest ideas and images, and then the desires that come from that. And that's where the journey we're on, or I'm on.
I think a sign of maturity is the ability to hold something in your imagination and then make decisions today that will either delay gratification or will set you up best. Your willingness to sacrifice today to see that ultimate dream or vision that you have come to pass in the future. And I think the part of us growing up in Christ is cultivating that image and that imagination, and then day by day choosing to make the choices, to implement the disciplines, to shape a life that will eventually lead us to that place. Yeah. It's not about earning. It's not about effort. It's about surrender.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that always keeps coming back to me whenever I am tempted to look to my own abilities or my own willpower to be able to achieve something. It's like, and I find that to be a bankrupt process. It's like, no, it's not about like willpower and self-effort. It's about surrender always, because it's in the surrender that God's grace is there to empower us to actually walk that out over time.
I don't know we're wrapping up, but by contrast, a slight contrast to that, you think about what does the tempter do? Sin is pleasurable for a season, but its end is death. And so what does the temptation do? It tries to put the image and idea about the pleasure and evoke the desire about the pleasure, and intentionally not telling you, not reminding you, not fostering the image of the result of pursuing that pleasure. And so that would heighten the awareness, is to say, if I'm being tempted, the image in my mind is about the pleasure, and that is evoking a desire in me for that pleasure, and it will be pleasurable very briefly.
Right.
But then it comes with a deep consequence. And we nurture the right image that's on the other side of the right decision, that's further out and harder to get to and a little more distant, and it's really frustrating because it's not immediate. You nurture that image, it will then teach you then Jesus as your teacher, and the grace that empowers you can navigate through temptation to get to the long-term pleasure and delight of pleasing God, of a transformed life, and overcome the temptation towards immediate pleasure.
That's awesome.
That's good stuff.
Well, I hope that you have been inspired in your imagination in this episode. Hey, please just leave us a comment. Let us know what stuck out to you. What are what is the thing that you feel like God is challenging you to imagine for your future and for your life? We would love to hear from you. Be sure to leave us a rating or review if you have that option on the platform. Like and subscribe. And if you'd like to donate to this podcast to help us make more, there's a link in the description for you to do that. We love you guys, and we'll see you on the next one.